Thank you for that introduction. As Daniel said, my name is Garrett Smith, and on behalf of my collaborators, I'm presenting our paper, If I Could Do This, I Feel Anyone Could, the design and evaluation of a Secondary Authentication Manager. We all know that password-based authentication is prone to attack. Passwords are hard to remember, easy to guess, and a prime target for attackers. To strengthen password-based authentication, more and more services have moved to two-factor authentication, requiring users to provide a proof of possession of a hard-to-steal second authentication factor, such as a phone number, secret code, or security key. For brevity, throughout this presentation, I will use the term SAF to refer to these secondary authentication factors. While 2FA can strengthen the security of online accounts, actual 2FA implementations vary widely across services. Services often have inconsistent terminology, differing requirements or policies, and different workflows, both for authentication but also in the setup of a SAF. A prime example here shows different services often call two-factor authentication different things, with GitHub above using the standard two-factor authentication, while Google opts to use their own term, two-step verification. To make matters even more complicated, when updating multiple accounts at a time, these differences in workflows, requirements, and terminology compound, creating a time-consuming and frustrating process that is described by Matt Blaze in this tweet, upgraded to a new phone, which is like taking a 12-hour refresher course in configuring 2FA. This process of updating multiple accounts at a time may occur when users first choose to adopt 2FA, when they replace an existing SAF, such as getting a new phone or upgrading to a new, more secure SAF, such as a YubiKey, when removing a lost SAF, or adding an additional SAF as a backup SAF, or to grant others, such as family members, access to their account. These arduous processes led us to realize that we already solved a similar problem of managing our primary authentication factors with password managers. So can we use a similar approach and help us manage our SAFs the same way password managers help us manage our passwords? To accomplish this task, we analyzed 10 different 2FA implementations across a variety of popular websites to create an abstraction of the general flow of the SAF setup process and how our tool could potentially automate this process. First, a manager would authenticate the website or the user to the website. The website would return a list of available SAF methods the user could enable. The manager, with the user's help, would select a preferred method. The website would then initiate the protocol by either providing the shared secret for TOTP or by sending a one-time password to the user's phone. The manager, with a user's help, would then verify possession of the SAF to the website. As a proof of concept for our abstraction, we created a Chrome extension that used JavaScript automation scripts injected into a supported website to set up and remove a SAF. While we created and tested methods for both setup and removal, in this talk, I'm going to primarily focus on the setup process. To learn more about our findings for the removal process, you could refer to our paper. In this prototype, users would first select to add a 2FA option. They would then be provided with a list of websites which the SAF manager currently supports. In this case, the user chose to set up 2FA on Google, Facebook, Twitter, and GitHub. Next, the user would provide their login details, select their preferred SAF, in this case TOTP, and then add the TOTP secret to their authenticator app. To prove ownership of the authenticator, they would provide the 6-digit code generated by the app, and then they're all done adding the SAF to their account. This process would then repeat with the exact same UI for the following 3 accounts. We intentionally reduced the setup process to the minimum number of steps required to add a SAF. In addition, we also added a progress bar to help users visualize where they were in the setup process and give them an estimate of how much time it would take to complete the setup process on each individual account, as well as the overall progress across all sites. Later in this presentation, we'll see how important this information is for users. The development of our proof of concept was the first step, but next, we needed to find out if our tool actually improved the 2FA process. To do this, we designed a user study to test if our SAF manager could increase the success rate, completion time, and overall usability of the 2FA setup process compared to the manual setup process. We thought that users who are more experienced with 2FA may actually find our tool more useful, since they were more likely to have interacted with the setup process of more websites. So to measure these differences, we divided our participants into 3 different study groups. First, the user study participants took a screening survey where they indicated what 2FA methods they currently used. Participants that only used SMS or didn't currently use 2FA were randomly placed into either Group A or Group B. Participants that were more advanced were placed into Group C. This design allowed us to compare Groups A and B to understand how our tool compares to the manual method for novice users, while comparing Groups B to C would allow us to see if a user's 2FA experience led to different results for those who were using our SAF Manager. We recruited 60 participants through Prolific, in which they took the screening survey mentioned earlier, then joined a researcher on a Zoom video call for the user study. Participants assigned to use our SAF Manager were given instructions on installing the Chrome extension. All participants were given instructions on how to install the Google TOTP Authenticator app on their mobile device. And then each participant was also given a unique Gmail, Dropbox, and Facebook account that they would use throughout the study. Participants were then instructed to set up TOTP as the 2FA method for their assigned Gmail, Dropbox, and Facebook accounts. Across the 3 websites, we found that our SAF Manager significantly improved the success rate of setting up a SAF. Novice participants who used the manual method had a 75% success rate of setting up 2FA on all 3 websites, while novice users who used our SAF Manager had a 100% success rate. Surprisingly, 2 participants in our advanced group were unsuccessful at setting up 2FA on the 3 sites, primarily due to complications with scanning the QR code. We also saw a significant decrease in the amount of time required to set up a SAF, with nearly 8 minutes using the website process and 5 or 4 minutes for our SAF Manager. We also found that our SAF Manager had higher usability, as measured through the system usability scale, than the manual method for both setup and removal. So at this point, you might be asking, well, what is it about the manual method that led to users not being able to set up to complete the task? We find a few reasons, but the primary reasons was a difficulty finding the 2FA settings page, being unable to scan the QR code, and a specific mistake that users encountered on Dropbox. When initiating the 2FA setup process on Dropbox, the website opens a sort of pop-up window within the website itself. The process begins the same as Google and Facebook, with the scanning of the QR code and then the entering of the generated code. However, when selecting Next, users will then see this page, where they could optionally add a backup number. At this point, some participants thought, well, I'm done. This step is optional. I'm not going to add a backup phone number, and I'm going to click the X in the corner. This action did not give any warning to the user that exiting at this point would cancel the 2FA setup process. Participants that clicked Next instead were shown an additional backup method. Some participants, again, clicked the X assuming they were done. Those that didn't were then sent to a final page where they would finalize their choice to enable 2FA. Another participant clicked this X thinking they were done, which unfortunately still left their account without 2FA enabled. Only by navigating through all 5 of these pages and finally selecting Next would participants successfully set up 2FA. Without being warned that exiting early would cancel the setup process, a few participants thought that they had successfully enabled 2FA. Our SAF Manager eliminated this mistake by alerting users if they attempted to close the process early and by providing that progress indicator I mentioned earlier. So while we find our SAF Manager to be a promising avenue, we recognize that we have a few significant limitations. Number 1, as designed, our SAF Manager offers limited scalability. Relying on JavaScript automation makes the process of adding new supported websites or maintaining existing websites extremely difficult. We already see a lack of adoption of 2FA and password managers, and those factors likely would also affect the adoption of a tool such as ours. Fortunately, there are some things that we can do about scalability, such as inviting websites to participate in a web API that could allow tools such as our SAF Manager to interface with websites directly, bypassing the need for custom automation scripts. Secondly, we could rely on existing crowdsourcing avenues to generate and maintain existing supported sites. Lastly, if a web API isn't adopted, As a community, we could advocate for improved web standards to simplify the required automation scripts. We also believe that our tool could be a potential avenue to investigate the problems with 2FA account recovery. Our tool already can quickly add backup SAFs. It could also potentially act as a backup SAF on its own. This could provide a streamlined account recovery process in the event of a lost device. Secondly, this tool could easily be expanded to support passwordless authentication as well. The common errors that we uncovered can already be directly applied to existing 2FA implementations to improve their setup and removal process. Further, we advocate for further standardizing the 2FA experience. By creating a standardized terminology and workflow across websites, we can improve the overall 2FA experience. Finally, we envision a merging of password managers and SAF managers into a single unified authentication manager. This tool could be used to reduce the friction of enabling 2FA further by automating more of the setup process. Such an authentication manager could help to manage all sorts of authentication methods, such as biometrics or passkeys, thus streamlining the entire authentication process. If you'd like to read more or view the source code for our prototype, please visit our website at this QR code here. Thank you all for your attention today, and I'm happy to take any questions.